For over 40 years, nearly 150,000 customers and over 30,000 channel partners spanning the globe have trusted ArcServe to strengthen their data resilience, recover lost assets, and ensure business continuity. With a unified approach to data protection and recovery, world-class technical support, and the lowest total cost of ownership, ArcServe helps businesses manage, defend, and most importantly, recover their data from any situation. Hello, everyone. My name is Sean Massey, and I'm the America's VP of Sales for ArcServe. Thank you so much for attending our additional segment of Beyond the Arc. This talk will not be any type of sales pitch, but rather be a discussion of industry trends and its effect on partners and customers. Today, I have as my guest Damian Stevens. Damian is the founder and CEO of Servocity. Welcome, Damian. It's great to have you here today.
Hey, Sean, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Super. So Damian, I'm just gonna kind of jump in. Tell everyone a little bit about yourself. How did you get into this space? What kind of event precipitated all that?
Part of it is I didn't know any better. I didn't know how hard it'd be. Yeah, the real backstory is I was an MSP. We were very fortunate and blessed to grow. I'll never forget one year we went from 4 to 17 employees. And that's when I learned we weren't prepared for that level of growth from an operational maturity and a culture perspective. And as we hired, I did the thing that I felt like was right, which was I'll just monitor the backups. I won't put that on all the new techs that we're joining. If you've ever grown your MSP, it can be kind of wild, especially that level of growth. And I was using a backup software, not ArcServe, but I don't know that it matters for the story because I don't blame the vendor. My point is every backup software takes backups, tells you success. All modern software like ArcServe now has additional things it can do to show you or help test those backups. And the problem is I didn't do any of the testing, right? And in that day, to be a little more fair to myself, it wasn't a thing. So whenever it said failure, I fixed it. Whenever it said success, I naively thought that meant I could always recover any version of that backup. And I went to recover for my client because they had 5 servers. They were all down. And I thought, well, this will be a long night getting them up and running and, bare metal restore and all that kind of good stuff. And, but, I'll get them up and running. And I tried one version. It's corrupt. Try another. It's corrupt. Right, my heart sank. If anybody's been through this, I still got like chill bumps, thinking about this. And every single version was corrupted because I had been backing up corrupted data. And if nobody else is listening, if you take nothing else from this, every tool today still can back up corrupt data and successfully restore the corrupted data. And so if you're not testing, you just don't know. And so anyway, I had to go to my client and say, that thing you trusted me with, that you've been paying me for years, I don't have that. And that's just not who I am. That was a super low moment for me as a person. And I was just like, I don't know that I want to be in IT. Maybe I'll jump out of airplanes for a living, something less stressful, right? And so I was doing a lot of soul searching, and the only thing that kind of saved me was I talked to other MSPs. And I realized, and this is the other thing, I realized I wasn't alone. So if you're listening to this and you're like, I've been there, or I've had a near miss, just realize you're not alone. Don't feel like you're the only one. You're actually the majority. And that's the kind of well-kept secret that just doesn't get out there as much. So that was my, story. There's a lot of nitty gritty to why and which versions. And, back in the day, this is going to date me, Exchange servers and, things like that are less prevalent today. But, there's just no feeling like not being able to do what you showed up to do. And from my perspective, if it's a service we're delivering, it's a promise we've made. And so those two were tied together. And so that's where I landed on. If, my philosophy now is if it's untested backup, it's Schrodinger's backup. You don't really know what you have there. And so, test your backups, and happy to talk more about what I've done since then. But that was kind of the origin story of why I'm here, and maybe ultimately why we're talking now, Sean.
Wow, thank you very much for sharing. That's a story, and actually, I think we have something a bit in common. My origin story too was working for a large solution provider. I started there as a senior engineer, but that at some point we had a little hosting center, and I was made the director of hosted and managed services, and at the MSP at the time I was building that. But in the hosting center, we hosted websites, email, and little co-location and some application hosting.
Hmm.
And March 19th of 2008, I will always remember that date, right? We had a little event and it was a fire, right? And when you think about application hosting, we call it SaaS backup right now, right? Because that was delivering all of their applications, over the web. It wasn't just us that had the fire. It was actually several dozen companies, right? Because you think about all of the things that we hosted, and we had certainly a disaster plan, but it wasn't tested, and
Hmm.
that was that's the Achilles heel, and so it certainly made for very, very stressful and intense 8 days in order to recover, and that's what brings us here on. We're ending we're in the final week of Backup Awareness Month, right? And so we're really kind of promoting just awareness to all of the things that could happen and around, and certainly when we think about data loss, I'm not quite sure maybe you want to share what was the cause of the data loss with
Yeah,
your
yeah.
customer.
So in my story, and that's why I don't blame the vendor, but I want everybody to know that doesn't already, which is you can back up data that is corrupt, so garbage in, garbage
Oh,
out.
right,
And so
right.
mine was we successfully backed up the data and we successfully restored it, and they were successful in firing us. Because at the end of the day, if you
Sure.
can't recover for your client, they don't care about the details of how many backups or what retention you did or didn't have, or in 1321, or you need to care about all those things to make sure you're meeting compliance or able to deliver on this business objectives. But like at the end of the day, when I couldn't produce, that was the big issue. And the reason that I don't blame the vendor is because
Mhm.
I never tested. And so,
Right.
you said June is Backup Awareness Month, which it is. I would just say my 2 cents is it should be Backup Testing Awareness Month. Like test your backups, because then right? Then you really know.
I mean, no doubt, no doubt there. Lots of different types of disasters, that can happen. The statistics that our analysts tell us, user error is almost always number one, as the number one cause of data loss. But now we're seeing really an advent of bad actors and ransomware attacks and everything, and certainly, but we're heading into hurricane season, and
Mm-hmm.
since we're talking about stories, I have another story, and actually the story um, is something that involves me personally, but I wasn't in charge of it. This was actually just a few years ago,
Hmm.
in my role, working for a data protection company. I went out on site to help a partner actually in the bayou, which is, I think it was about an hour and a half outside of New Orleans. And New Orleans there was another hurricane that came. It didn't hit New Orleans straight on, but it really impacted this area, quite a bit. And I don't know if folks, when we think about natural disasters, we think about hurricanes and things. We really, the end result is that it happens, and then the news will report on it for a couple days, and then people forget about it. But
Mm-hmm.
when I came out to this area, this was a good 3 weeks later, folks were still without power. Folks were still without internet. And in fact, this one particular customer of the partner, which was a doctor's office, we were working, trying to get them up. They had power, certainly, but one of the issues that was convoluting the whole restore process was that their internet would go up and it would go down. And the reason for that is that they're trying to restore things all around to the area, and internet actually takes a backseat to power.
Mm-hmm.
So the internet service provider would be repairing these lines, and they'd get the internet up, to a geographic area, and then a backhoe would hit those lines in order to get in to restore power and the data. So it's really something that can really take a lot of effort and a lot of persistence, certainly in those type of areas, to make sure that we're able to do that. So, when we think about disaster, it comes in lots of different packages, and certainly it's how we respond. Um, so, now you founded a company called Servacity,
Hmm.
and certainly you're helping customers and partners really in their backup and recovery area. What would you recommend, if somebody experiences a disaster, what should they do first?
Yeah, maybe update your resume, right? I think it depends on your level of preparedness, right? There's so many disasters, right? Disasters are natural in terms of a hurricane. Disasters are human in terms of just I deleted a file, but that was the database. They're human in terms of obviously there's all the threat actors out there. So, ransomware being one of the more common, but there's so many other ways that you can be facing something like that, and even if you're running in the cloud, there is no such thing as a perfect system. So even if you're running in a public cloud provider, you still need to protect that. So um, I think that just goes back to the testing of it. So over the past 18 years between formerly being an MSP and then starting Servacity to serve MSPs, I have built this way too elaborate process. But it's basically part what does Servacity do? We do all of this testing for you, and it's also part what could you do? So the way I serve MSPs is one is they can hire us to do those sort of things for them. The other is you can download the process, and there's no charge for that. So you can take a great tool like ArcServe's Shadow Protect tool, and make sure that you're not only running backups, but you have an actual testing regimen. And the process that we've built out is from a business perspective first. And so it's more of an operational maturity around your backup operations and testing operations, because basically the dichotomy that I see is, do you believe in any backup that hasn't been tested? And I'll talk to most MSPs. They're like, no, I don't. I mean, I don't really fully trust it if it hasn't been tested. Okay, great. How often do you test? Uh, annually, maybe less often, like annually for the two people. And that's nothing against you as an MSP. I know as an MSP, I didn't get around to it. There's so many things to do, and the customer never wants to pay. And they certainly don't want to pay extra, right? They often want the cheapest. So part of that process that I've built out is how do you build operational maturity so that just like you wouldn't run a backup and never look at a report, then the testing becomes second nature and it becomes a operational process. And that way it's not only in one person's head, and it's something that you could do and be effective with your time. Because obviously as an MSP, you have to be competitive. You can't just say, well, I'm going to feel good because I do all this testing, but now I'm going to price myself out of the market because I'm just throwing labor at it. So for me, it comes back to what kind of operational maturity do you have? What kind of SOPs do you have? And if you have those, that means periodically, that could be annual, it could be quarterly, you're doing different tests. So the process that I authored has the daily, weekly, monthly, and quarterly testing intervals, and you're testing different things at different intervals. So daily, you're testing the integrity of volumes, all the way to quarterly, testing full scale cloud disaster recovery testing, right? So we're preparing for hurricanes. So long story short, if you've done a test for what if the building's on fire or the hurricane, has no internet or power, what are we going to do? Then you kind of know, and it's still a stressful event, but it is way less stressful if you've ever tested any of those scenarios.
Well, I mean, and if I could just add on to that, when you go through a true disaster and you haven't tested, you've got a pit in your stomach the whole time, wondering, is this going to work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When you have tested, you know, and I've done this now both ways, and it's everything is tested, then you know I've done this, I've been successful at it, it's going to work. I'm going to get my customer back up and running. I'm going to get my data center back up and running, and that's really good. The other thing I'd like just to accentuate is just your comment about the different levels of testing. I mean, you're spot on there, Damien. I mean, really, you want to test and make sure that the backup program is working, and that's going to be, your volume test. But at some point in time, you know that the backup works, but it's not until you do a full disaster DR test that you understand how do all of those pieces come together, and how
Yes.
and what does that mean? How I'll tell you, and I've working for the solution provider, I've been in on-prem in some pretty hot times where I've got the owner of the company over my shoulder saying, when are we going to come back up? When are we
Yeah.
going to come back up? Right. And if you've never done it, if you've never put everything together from a DR standpoint, and that's all done with the testing, you just don't know. it's
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
hard. Yeah.
There's two parts to that, I would say, right? Disaster recovery, even if, even when the tools work right, even when everything works, like it's not 5 minutes. And my point is, maybe we can recover to a few minutes ago. Maybe we can recover pretty quickly in terms of the servers are booted. Maybe, but when you boot up in a different environment, in a cloud environment, what I've realized is because MSPs don't test generally that the disaster recovery scenario, maybe because it's not easy enough, but because that testing doesn't happen, you don't realize that all the drives are going to remap. They're no longer the same letters. You haven't thought through that comes before your application server. There should be a boot order. You haven't thought through, I can't run QuickBooks over a VPN. It just won't work. It's not supported. And so it is just orders of magnitude less stressful if you've ever done a test, because that makes it really easy as an MSP to go, oh, we did this test and we realized the drives need to be remapped, or AD needs to come up first, or whatever the scenario is. You jot those down next time, you are so much more prepared. And I don't care who's telling you this and how fast the cool technology is, will never replace you as an MSP. So just because a server is on does not mean that it is configured in the way that they need it, right? You might need to restart services or remap drives or whatever. So back to your point, Sean, you're sweating it. If you haven't tested, you are sweating it. And whether that's 8 hours or 8 days, between that event and things spinning up and remapping drives and telling them you're good, I don't want you to have to spend 8 hours or 8 days with this pit in your stomach because you've never done it. And you just don't even know because in my experience, that entire time, I'm thinking, oh no, this is not going to work. Oh no. And then finally, if everything's up, then I can breathe for the first time in 8 hours or 8 days. And so don't put yourself through that stress when you don't have to.
I mean, that really, really excellent points. I'm reminded, and I wish I should have, just as you were talking, and it gave me a memory of, kind of a saying, of course. Well, before I get to the saying, it's really going to be important to have a plan, and the plan is, I mean, just as you articulated, just making sure you have a good priority of what needs to be restored, what needs to be restored in order, the order of operations and all that. But the saying that came to my mind is, you try and you fail. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's your testing. And then you try again and you fail better, right?
Mm-hmm.
So every single testing that you end up doing, I coach folks, never be freaked out if your DR test fails,
Mm-hmm. It's a valid
because
test.
that's the purpose of the testing. Then it's what you do with that test to
Mm-hmm.
fix the items that failed, and then so the next time, even though maybe the second time it fails again, but it fails better, right? So
Yeah.
then you're constantly working and improving to be able to do that.
No, I think that's a perfect point, Sean, because most, not all, but most people are delivering a managed service. And sure, it's recurring. We like that. We like that it's predictable and recurring, right? As an MSP, but you're getting better. You're not just going out, like you're not getting hired to go out and say, we have to fix everything across all devices in the network once and nail it. And they're going to stare at us until it's done. And then we have to be done. It has to be perfect. That's kind of the analogy that you're making without testing. You're forcing yourself to be kind of perfect the first time. Whereas when you're delivering a managed services, you understand that you put this in place because you've learned this across clients and this works for most. But then for this particular client, you realize, oh, we've got to put in some different security rules. We have to put in a little more resources in this virtual machine. We have to tweak the network in this way, and you improve it. If you haven't tested, you haven't even done version 1 of that. And look, this is not me beating up MSPs. It's hard to find the time to do that. So you need the people and the processes if you want to take advantage of that process. Any part of it, I'll make that available to anybody that wants it. You can download it. So have your people use the process. Use a great tool like ArcServe, SPX. But that'll allow you to use anything to do it. If that's too much, you can have us do it for you. But I just want people to do it. That's why I give the process away. It sounds kind of counterintuitive, but the more you can take away from that, right? And if you look at the 18 years I built that process and you only take one thing away, that's a victory from my perspective, because if that helps you be better prepared and more mature in your process, then you're running a better business with less risk, which I think at the end of the day is what we all want. We want to mature the business. We want to understand our risk for us and our clients.
Certainly that is what we all want. And it, where I look at the time and I'm just going to wrap up things up because unfortunately we're out of time. But just my closing thoughts there, and it doesn't matter whether you're an MSP or whether you're end user business or whatever. All of these concepts are really relevant, and ultimately it's really important that we are planning for every possibility, and not just planning for it, but we're testing for it.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to protect what's priceless and remember that data resilience doesn't just happen. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Damien, for coming, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Sean. Thank you guys for having me.